Testing. 1, 2, 3. Testing. Anybody give me a sound check? Testing, testing. Okay, so we're basically working on help for new fish keepers, trying to give people that are new to the hobby a heads up on things that we know will help them in their progression to get them from a raw amateur to the sub level of being able to keep their fish. Sound and visuals, good. Thanks, Kaylor. Welcome to the stream. Cobweb Caverns, welcome to the stream. Good. I knock on wood. I seem to have gotten through the audio problems that I was having so much of. So basically what we're trying to do, or what I would like to do here, is to help new people to the hobby have a better shot at becoming regulars in the hobby instead of buying a fish tank, watching all the fish die, and not knowing what happened, and deciding to put the fish tank and all the accoutrement in the garage and never speak of it again. Uh, it keeps a lot of people out of the hobby. It keeps a lot of people that would probably enjoy the hobby out. So I think it's incumbent on us as fish keepers. Welcome to the stream, Justin. It's incumbent on us as fish keepers to try our best to help new people out, to give them the benefit of some of our experience, whether those experiences are good or bad. And what we've done is we started out talking about water, because I think water's, I named my channel Water. I think water is one of the most critical things that we do as fish keepers, is taking care of the water, and the fish pretty much take care of themselves after that, other than us feeding and keeping their tank clean. And we've moved on to substrate, and I tried to cover an awful lot about substrate in the last stream. I'm not sure if the ways that I attempted to cover substrate were clear or were to the point enough for most people, but hopefully new people will have gotten some good out of it. And I'd like to wrap up the substrate section before we move on. Cobweb Cavern says, so substrates. To me, for beginners, there are 3 options. Let's ignore higher-ended planted tanks. Either bare tank, gravel, or sand. And there's pros and cons to each. And I agree, Cobwebs, and I tried to cover those in the last section, the last video. I think that bare tanks are best for breeding situations where you may have fry already and you're trying your best to keep the tank clean easily, and you're trying your best. One of the things about keeping fry is that in the wild, fry don't have to move very far to find food. So in our tanks, it's probably best that we make it where fry can find food easily, where they don't have to work. And so a bare tank or a fry basket or something where It's not difficult to make sure that all the food gets eaten and doesn't start causing problems with fouling the water. A bare bottom tank is pretty handy for that. You can see the food that's on the bottom. Cobweb Cavern says bare tanks allow you to see any uneaten food or poop, but don't allow for additional beneficial bacteria within the body of the tank itself. They can be a bit sterile in that aspect, and that's very true. Our bacteria, the preponderance of bacteria layer in a tank is always going to be in your substrate because it's a lot more area for the bacteria to colonize. Hey, Big Ease, welcome to the tank, man. Big Easy, welcome to the tank. Welcome to the tank. Welcome to the stream, man. How's Big Easy been? And to your second point, gravel, I think we covered gravel pretty well, and that's a really wide subject because there are all kinds of both sterile gravel. You can buy gravel that is already inoculated with dark water extract or bio bacteria from South American landscapes or from Central American landscapes or from African landscapes or basically anywhere in the world. There are certain kinds of substrata that are developed for those fish completely. So gravel in itself can be a huge wide range. I've got some gravel in my shrimp tank, my 2020 high shrimp tank, where I basically got a Skittles mix from Lucas Brett's, and I've had that substrate for about 20 years or 30 years, and it is like blown glass. It's little white balls that are like puffed blown glass. I'm not sure exactly what it is. It's probably some kind of mineral or rock that they did that with. But I put that in there because I had a little of it. I didn't have a lot left over. It came out of an old tank that had sat unused for a long time. In fact, I think the tank was cracked. And so I basically just set it aside as it was. But I could get enough out of that tank to put a thin layer on the bottom of my shrimp tank. And shrimp don't need a whole lot of depth in the substrate in their tank. As long as they have a little substrate, they're going to be able to pick it up and roll it around and eat detritus or whatever they're looking for. Hey, Jeff Rose, welcome to the stream, man. Jeff Rose, I haven't caught one of your streams lately. We're getting down to playoff time in NBA basketball, and I'm watching my Pacers pretty heavy. So a lot of times your streams come on when the Pacers games come on. Bob's streams do the same thing to me a lot. I'll see there's one coming on, but I'm going to be watching the Pacers until the playoffs are over. So if you wonder where I am, just check and see if there's a Pacers game on, and you'll know where I am. Cobweb Caverns adds sand. Looks good, like a bare tank. Can be easy to spot detritus buildup, but they can allow for anaerobic buildup of gases if the sand gets too deep or you don't have bottom feeders to move it. And I tried to cover those. Hey, Candy, welcome to the stream. Cobweb Cavern says gravel, hardest to keep clean, but can be used as a filter on its own if you use under gravel filter plates. Probably the easiest option for a noob to have a tank that looks good and is functional. And yeah, I've tried my best to cover those three. There are others, and I think it's incumbent to Cobweb Caverns, I live in Indiana, and everything Indiana is the Indianapolis 500 race stuff. So the Pacers are from Indianapolis, and pacer in their sense means race car pacer, the pace car. So the Pacers are the pace car of the NBA, and that's. But yes, there was an awful car from the late '70s that was called the Pacer. But I think the preponderance of the usage of the word Pacers in this case is from pace car, Indianapolis 500 pace car. One of the substratas that I think I didn't cover very well, there are many. Kaler's Aquatic says I use a combo of sand and or gravel. The amount depends on what I'm doing with the tank. Some a single layer, half the bottom. Some have a mix, 1 inch the whole bottom. No formula fits every tank for me. Ah, okay, says Cobwebs Caverns. Kaler's Aquatics, I also, in my 110-gallon tank, it is half sand, or actually it's a third sand, because I put styrofoam down under my rock wall that I have for my plecos. I tried to create a rock wall with holes in it for them to use as caves. Can't stream it. March Madness game all day and night. Yep, March Madness is coming up. One of the substrates that I think it's critical to cover that we haven't really talked about, or I haven't really talked about, is crushed coral. If you have a tank, if a new fish keeper has a tank and the water that they have coming from their tap is fairly soft, like if you live out in the far northwest like Corey does. Hey Angelo's Fish Tanks, welcome to the stream. Angelo says, hi Dwayne, it feels like forever since I caught you live. How have you been? Angelo, we've had kind of a rough go, my wife and I have here the past several months. Life's been kind of cantankerous for us. We've had health problems and deaths in the family. So it's been kind of a grind. I took a month off. I took all of January off from YouTube just because I felt like I needed to spend some time away from YouTube and kind of clear my mind a little bit and deal with all the moving households when people have died and things like that. So it's been kind of a rough stretch. I mean, life's like that. You just go through times when it's kind of rough. But back to my subject here. One of the ways that you can buffer water, if you have really soft water and you're trying to keep African cichlids, or conversely, if you have really hard water and you're trying to keep South Americans or tetras that require 4.0 pH, you can buffer the water. Now, there are buffer products that are out there, and if you have to use them, you can use them. I don't really recommend using buffering products. When I first moved to Indiana, I had a bunch of, I had a ton of fish, and I moved in, set up one of my 110-gallon tanks, and did my water tests on the water. I used half water that I had brought with me to keep my fish in. I brought my fish in a bunch of tubs, plastic tubs, with battery operated air stones in them. And I only lost 2 fish in the whole trip from Dallas, Texas to Indianapolis in a 36-foot U-Haul van truck. And I set up one of my 110-gallon tanks, and I put half of the water that I had brought with me in there so that I knew that there was some bacteria in it, and I knew that there was some that they would have water that they were used to in the tank. And then I filled it the rest of the way up with the local water, and I tested the local water, and it was rock hard. I came from Texas where the water's pretty hard. There's a lot of calcium in the ground in Texas, and the water is pretty hard. It filters through a lot of calcium, but it wasn't near as hard as the water in Indianapolis was. And I set that tank up. I squeezed out some filter medium that I had brought with me into the tank. I used buffer products to buffer the water back down to where I thought it was pretty close to what it was in Dallas. And I put my fish in, and they seemed to do just fine. And I got up the next morning, and the pH had overcome the buffer and popped straight back up again. The water was once again rock hard, and 2/3 of my fish died over the intervening week from that one massive hardness swing over one night. And I had buffered that water really good. So my personal experience through the years is that using a pH up or down buffer is not that good of a thing to do, that it really won't hold for very long, even if you've worked really hard to try to super buffer it down or super buffer it up. My experience is you're a lot better using natural substrates, which will do what you want, buffer up or buffer down. And to that end, I think that crushed coral is one of the best substrates that you can use. It's not usually the best looking, although a lot of saltwater tanks use crushed coral as a substrate, but it will buffer the water. It will keep the pH up. It will keep the hardness up. If you have water in a tank, like say you're getting 110 TDS out of your tap, which is pretty soft. It's not as soft as, say like 20 or 30 like you might get up in the far northwest, but it's pretty soft for African cichlids who want the water in the 300 or 400 range at least. And you put that water, and say the pH is slightly below 7 on that tap water, and it is slightly acidic. If you put that water in a tank that has a inch and a half of crushed coral in it, the water itself will begin to dissolve that crushed coral. It will pull the calcium out of that crushed coral and put it in the water column. And if you watch closely, the pH of that water will rise above 7. It will become base instead of acidic. And pH is usually, not always, but usually much more steady in a base, in a higher pH. If you're running a pH of 7.5, if you're running a pH of 8, your hardness, your calcium hardness, and your basic hardness and your pH will stay much steadier than if you're running an acidic pH and very soft water. Very soft water can go south really quickly. It can go from 5.0 pH to 3.8 pH really quickly because there is no buffering in the water to keep that pH from dropping. And pH is a fairly unstable thing to begin with. Normally, it is per hydrogen, how many hydrogen atoms are in the in the water column itself. And you can have a pH of 20 and still have acidic water. It's not going to stay that way for very long, but pH doesn't always give you an accurate measurement of whether your water is base or acidic. You know, it's giving you how much hydrogen is in the water. It's not giving you how much. It will show you whether the water is base or acidic, but you can have wildly varying pH readings in the same water that's been in your tank for a while. So you've got to understand when reading pH, all of the different ways that pH can vary. And if you've got a lot of plants in a tank, they will tend to drive the pH down because they're using those minerals out of the water to grow with, and so they will knock down the buffering ability of the water to hold the pH high. So if you want to buffer a tank down, if you're trying to keep fish that are from South America, then you want to add probably a substrate that's made for South Americans, you know, like Eco-Complete South American. It will have lower pH stuff. It will have bacteria that is made for lower pH stuff already inoculated into it. But you also want to add driftwood, wood for the tank, because wood will release tannins and will also drop the pH. And you would probably want to have a lot of plants in your tank because those plants will, like I said, use up the minerals that are in the water and the waste that's produced by fish and drop the pH slowly too. I mean, you kind of have to watch it. You know, if you're doing regular changes with harder water, then your tank's probably never going to get out of control pH wise. But if you don't do regular water changes, if you just change the water or just top off the tank occasionally, then you kind of have to watch your pH because it will begin to slide if you use a lot of plants and a substrate that is, you know, some of them have ammonia qualities towards them, in them, you know, like Brightwell. You've got to watch for an ammonia spike. They are, some of them are made for shrimp that prefer low TDS water. So you have to watch what happens in a tank that you are naturally buffering down with wood and plants. And on the converse side, if you're trying to naturally buffer the water in your tank up, then things like crushed coral for a substrate, things like you can put large snail shells in a tank and they will slowly dissolve. You can put large chunks of coral that don't have to be crushed, just large natural bleached coral can go in a tank and release calcium into the water. There are a lot, some people use crushed eggshells. There are a lot of ways to naturally buffer your tank. And by naturally, I mean it's continuously in the tank and it's continuously working. It's not an additive that you pour in and watch where it goes and then watch how it falls or rises and then have to add more. I'm talking about things that you put in the tank and they become part of the decor of the tank or part of your equipment in the tank. And you know, you can stick crushed coral and any number of Texas holy rock, a lot of different kinds of things will release calcium into the water, and you can put those in your canister filters, you can put them in your hang on back filters, you can put them in your corner filters, and they will continuously buffer the water because they will continuously release calcium into the water when the water is acidic enough or lacking enough in calcium for it to be released. And I just think that, I mean, there are so many areas where a new fish keeper or a new aquarist needs to have an understanding of what's going on in the tank. And I think that substrate is a very important one because it's one of the basic building blocks to setting up a tank. And I think that if you are going to heavily plant, then you need, you know, if you love plants and you want to try your hand at keeping live plants, which is something I highly recommend because it's a natural environment for your fish, you need to think about those things before you buy that bag of clown puke gravel and throw it in the tank. If it is not going to have the right minerals, the right buffering, the right fertilizers for your plants. So you are going to have a harder time keeping plants. And all of these little bits of information and knowledge need to be lined up in your head before you ever do anything. The next topic that I am going to try to cover in this little stretch of videos that we're live streams that we're doing here is research. And I think research is critical to a new fish keeper. I think that they, more than anybody, need to spend a great deal of time studying the fish that they're going to try to keep, studying the plants that they want to keep, studying the biotopes of the plants and fish that they want to keep, and recognizing what they need to do to make that biotype come to life in their tank and to give their fish a place to thrive and survive so that they're not fighting themselves when it comes to what is going on in their tank. Fish keeping is difficult enough without having the setup working against you, without having the substrate that you've chosen working against you, without having the fish that you've chosen to house together working against you. All of those things are added problems that we as fish keepers can avoid by doing some research before we go out and buy the fish. Now, as we all know, as every one of us in here and all of you out there know, as fish keepers, we tend to go to a fish store and see something we want that we've never seen before, that we have no idea about, and say, impulse, I want it. Before somebody else buys that fish, I'm going to buy it because I don't know what it is and I want it. And we bring that fish home without any real clear idea of what it is. So many of us that are better fish keepers, when we put ourselves in this situation, the first thing we're going to do is sit down at the computer and plug the name of that fish in, or as close as we can figure. And if we don't have a real name for that fish, we're going to look up fish we know that are like it and try to figure out what fish we have and what requirements that fish has. We're going to open up our books from our library. We're going to study as much as we can about that fish so that we can say, oh yeah, I got a shrimp tank that is almost exactly the same parameters that this fish needs. And I know what the parameters were at my fish store when I bought it. I know what kind of hardness it was in. And I'm going to try to strike a happy medium among all the tanks that I have to put this fish in its best possible placement in my fish room. And that is all research. And I would like to spend a couple of 3 more videos in this Welcome New Fish Keepers section, or So You Bought a Fish Tank, as I called it. Hey, down the wormhole, welcome to the stream. I really think that research, recognizing what the fish we have are and what they require from us to be comfortable in their surroundings, to be able to thrive, is one of the most critical things that all fish keepers need to do. And I know telling someone who's just gone out and spent $300 on a setup for their child's fish that they wanted to buy and brought it home and set it all up, and now they're having trouble. I know telling them that they need to go out and spend another $200 on books is probably not what they want to hear, but I am here to tell you that every dollar you invest in information, good information, will more than make itself up in worth when you run into a problem and you've got $100 fish on the line that you think you're fixing to lose. Unless you can find information that helps you save that fish, then the price of the books that you bought becomes immaterial. It's the knowledge that you can glean from those books. Now, you do have to be kind of selective about what kind of books you purchase, but I think we can get in real depth into this issue in the next live stream. And the reason I'm broaching it now is because I really feel like that it's critical to what kind of water you keep, what kind of substrate you keep, what kind of fish you keep. All of that should be taken care of in research. My best advice for a new fish keeper, if your child wants to raise that fish, give the store $20 and say, hold this fish for me for 2 months and sell me the tanks and equipment and substrate that I need to keep this fish, and let me buy several books, and I will go home and set this tank up, let the plants grow for 30 days and mature in this tank. I will let the tank cycle fully, and then we'll come back and pick the fish up. Because the money that you spend on equipment, you're going to be out one way or another. The money that you spend on information and books, and I highly recommend the internet as a place to look. It's just the internet does not have editors looking over the shoulder of the people that you're getting the information from. There is no final arbiter that says, don't listen to this, this is wrong. Listen to this is correct. You basically are at risk of someone like me telling you bad advice. And I will tell you without a doubt that I have given bad advice as a fish keeper. Sometimes we gain strength in our hobby and still carry bad advice that we've gotten from long ago. And I promise you, I will make mistakes in my delivery. I will give you unintentionally bad advice on occasion. I am human. Hey, KG Cichlids, welcome to the stream, man. And what I suggest is that you look at the internet, see what those people are saying, see what this long-haired, long-bearded guy is telling you, and then go to your books, go to your reference, and check what I'm saying against your reference. And if your reference says something similar, or you can find some piece of information that sounds real similar to what I'm saying, and when I say I mean anybody on the internet, whether you're reading, watching, listening, however you're gaining information about fish keeping for the first time on the internet, I think that you need to check what you pick up on the internet, unless it's Tropical Fish Hobbyist magazine that you're reading on the internet, or Amazonas, or Cichlid Homeroom Companion, places where real experts have gathered and are working towards making sure that the information that is given is correct, or as correct as it can be, where there is someone editing the content that's coming out on those places, then yes, you can take that to the bank. It's going to be as good of information as you're probably going to get even in reference books. But by having those reference books, anytime you want in the future, whether your computer goes down, whether the lights go out in your house, you're still going to be able to pull that book out and light a candle and read that information over and over and over again. If you go dry in the hobby and 10 years later you pick up one of those fish keeping books and start reading it and get bitten by the bug again, that information is still there waiting for you. It's not going to change. I mean, it may become outdated, but it is still there and valuable for you. So I'm going to wrap up this section on substrate. I think that we've covered it quite well. Probably not for someone who's brand new to the hobby. They might very well have a million questions, and if they deign so, they can surely ask me in the comments section, and I will do my best, and the people that are on my channel regularly will do their best to give them helpful answers. I just want to stress that they, as new fish keepers, need to begin to understand what each of these things represents in the fish's world. You know, Eric Bodrock says, be the fish, because that's the only way you're really going to understand what's going on for your fish, understand how they are reacting, how they are thriving or suffering in that fish tank. You need to be the fish. You need to watch the fish. You need to understand the fish. You need to recognize what it's telling you. Our fish are talking to us constantly. They're constantly, through their behaviors, showing us whether they're ready to breed, because they're showing the other fish in the tank whether they're ready to breed. They're showing us whether they're happy. They're showing us whether they feel in danger. They're showing us whether they feel ill or they are suffering from some kind of parasite. They are showing us how they rank in the pecking order of the fish around them, whether they're a dominant fish or whether they're a subdominant fish. They're showing us uh, through their coloration whether they're suffering from some disease, whether they're happy, whether they're mad, whether they're feeling territorial, whether they're feeling like they've got ick on their skin and they're flicking it off. Their behaviors, their colorations, their actions, all of these things are continuously speaking to the other fish in the tank, but also to us as hobbyists if we observe the fish closely enough to quote, quote, be the fish. If we can be the fish, we can understand through the fish's actions what is going on with that fish. That fish may have some type of food in it that's causing it bloat issues, and it's trying to swim really difficultly and floating up to the surface. If we're being the fish, we can recognize what that behavior is, what that problem is, and how we can go about trying to solve that issue before it becomes life-threatening, before it kills our fish. And that's what new fish keepers need. They need to have a basic understanding of the common areas of fish keeping, the nitrogen cycle, lights, substrate, research, fish, plants, filtration. All of these things are separate, but they all go together to create the environment that our fish live in. Whether they're going to barely survive, whether they're going to die, whether they're going to thrive, whether they're going to thrive and breed and produce fry that survive. All of these things are dependent on the water, the substrate, the plants, the decorations, the filtration, the research that we've done, our ability to be the fish, to observe the fish. All of these things, while separate in of themselves and as little subtopics, all come together in the process of fish keeping to keep our fish thriving or to keep our fish dying, depending on how effective we are at going through these steps and making use of them. So all of these things are critical knowledge that are required of a new fish keeper. After years and years of keeping fish, a lot of this stuff will just become second nature to you. You won't have to think about it. You won't have to get a book out and look it up because you will already have done it 20 times to the point where not only did you absorb the knowledge, but you actually reached a point with your absorption of the knowledge where you began to be able to say, aha, what this really means is I need to do this, this, and this. It's not just understanding, it's knowing what that means in a real-time situation. Okay, I'm having this problem, and I know from my reading that this caused the problem, and I also know from my other research that this is one of the ways that problem gets solved. So if I put all those together and have that aha moment, I understand what I need to do. KG Cichlid says that's what a lot of people don't understand. When a fish shows you ailment indications, such as faded color or stringy poop, that is or may be suffering and needs help. I'm a believer that fish do. Yeah, I do too. Like an Oscar sulking because it's being a big baby. Yeah. Oh, you're saying that fish have feelings. Um, I think fish are far more advanced than any of us give them credit for. I think fish are much more highly intuitively intelligent than any of us give them credit for. I think because we eat fish, because fish are a food source for us, we tend to think that that they're so much lesser than us. We don't like the idea of thinking about fish suffering in sea trawlers or large catch boats. We don't we don't want to think about that. We want to say, oh, that's my dinner. We don't want to say, oh, that fish suffered to feed me. So it's natural for us to look at fish as food and nothing more, and not tend to focus on their strengths and abilities and how intelligent they are. And I think because of that, a lot of the people in the world really believe that fish are just dumb, stupid animals, you know, or in this case, dumb, stupid invertebrates or vertebrates. Um, and I don't think that they are that far down the scale. I mean, basically, we as human beings, and a lot of this depends on your religious beliefs, but basically, we as human beings crawled up out of the ocean millions of years ago onto the land and evolved and then crawled back into the ocean millions of years after that and evolved and then crawled back out on the land again millions of years ago and evolved yet again into simple animals that became human beings through their evolution. So we're not that far removed. Our brains may be a lot bigger, not that we use our brains very well sometimes, but our brains may be a lot bigger. But that doesn't mean that fish's brains don't do a lot of work. Hey, Thirsty Rabbit, thanks to you. Welcome to the stream. I'm just about to wrap it up, guys. If you guys have any more comments or questions, I'd love to see them. They always give me more material to work with. I just I've been doing lots of live streams. I've done over 100 live streams, and I just felt like helping new fish keepers was what I really needed to be doing with these live streams, or trying to get all of us to help new fish keepers. I'm no expert. I'm not someone that's so Johnny on the spot that everyone needs to listen to me, but I think that I have enough experience, bad and good, in this hobby that I can offer a lot of anecdotal information and some knowledge that I have gleaned from reading and studying and talking to other fish keepers. KG Cichlids says, just because it doesn't show emotion doesn't mean it isn't in a mood or suffering. You get a pair of Jack Dempsey's forming in a tank full of community fish, you're going to see a lot of emotions go on in that tank. If you've got a 55-gallon with two 6-inch Jack Dempseys that just paired off and a bunch of other dither fish, you're going to see emotion in a tank. If you've got a pair of Jaguar cichlids, Maniquinci, in a tank with a bunch of other large cichlids, you're going to see a lot of emotion come to the surface in that tank. You're going to watch those two fish fight each other until they prove to each other that they are suitable mates. You're then going to watch those fish terrorize everything in the tank until everything in the tank stays completely away from the area that they want to use to lay eggs. You're going to watch those fish look carefully and lovingly lay their eggs and fertilize them. You're going to watch them carefully clean and monitor those eggs until they hatch. You're going to watch both mother and father carefully dig pits and move those baby fry from one pit until the other until they become really free swimming. You are going to see all kinds of emotion in a fish tank. I really recommend, my wife bought me a book 3 or 4 years ago for Christmas called What a Fish Knows. And I reviewed that book in one of my book reviews. And I highly recommend it to anyone who's reached the stage in their fish keeping where they really have this same feeling that fish are more highly intelligent. Fish will train you. You're not going to train fish very often. You can train them. You can train them as to which side of the tank the food's going to come in on. You can train them in that way. But fish will train you. Every time you enter that room, they're going to be in your face wanting you to feed them if they recognize you as the person that does feed them. Every time they see you, they are going to go through a whole range of emotions and express them to you over and over and over again, trying to get you trained. And they will work tirelessly to train you. All right, guys, I'm going to wrap it up. I think we've pretty well put substrate to bed in the sense of covering it. And next week, and even though I've already broached it, I'm going to try to dive headlong into research. I know that some of you guys will probably get tired of my long-windedness on some of these topics, but I really want to cover them for new fish keepers, people that are new to the hobby. And once we get through all of these sections, then I'll go back to another format again. I mean, I still intend to answer anyone's questions that ask them during the live streams. I'm not about not. I just want to, for a while, focus on what I feel like is really an important need in this hobby for people that have experience, to really try to talk and communicate with people that are just starting out in the hobby, that have bought a fish tank because their children fell in love with the spotted goldfish or whatever brings them into the hobby. They fell in love with the little fish that they saw at the store. Whatever has brought them into the hobby, I think it's incumbent on us to try the best we can to let them continue in the hobby without having this terrible experience of taking the fish home, setting everything up, and watching it die, and never wanting to have anything to do with fish keeping again. That's the thing that I wish we could help people avoid, so that they have a good experience with their first tank, and that it gives them a chance to learn, to advance in the hobby, and to become another fish keeper like we are, to become someone who keeps recognizing how deep and wide this hobby and the science of this hobby can spread out underneath you. Nobody knows it all. You can find the greatest expert that ever lived, and there are corners of this hobby they have no idea about. All right, guys, I hope you have a good rest of your Saturday, a good weekend. I hope you have good luck with your fish. And I'm out for another week. I will get back to you next week and we will start research. Good luck.